Record, we're ready to go.
Okay.
And she's done it.
So
You're
we're ready
live.
to go. We're ready to do this. Okay, everybody. Hey, first of all, I just want to thank you for go ahead and registering for this webinar. It's something that we talked about at the last Kansas Library Association conference when we had our wonderful business meeting. And I get emails every so often about people just excited about PLS and what we're doing this year. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was have a series of webinars, continue, get that continuing education piece that everyone kind of wants out of KLA, other than just kind of giving them your money each year so you can go to the conference. We talked about how it'd be nice if there was something that would happen throughout the year, so that you had some value added to your experience in KLA, and specifically the public library section. We did some brainstorming during that business meeting, and we came up with about 4 or 5 really good ideas. We sent out a survey and got a few more. And I'm happy to say that right now we have 3 more presenters lined up. Kind of checking with one of them real quick to make sure they're going to be able to do it. But really excited about, the next webinar episode is going to be Laura DeBon, working on a date for that. And she's going to talk about personnel policies. And then after that, we're going to have Mickey Caldwell talk about resources for new librarians. But first, the first one I thought about was community engagement, and I called it The Force Awakens because I wasn't that funny this morning when I put that slide together. But community engagement really, it's about you getting out of the library. And, there's always those people who say, every time I come in, you're not there. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. When you're getting out in the community, you're connecting with people that are going to be able to help you grow as a library. And the important part of engagement is you're going out there to get them in. And that means not only getting them physically into the library, but also invested in what it is you're doing as a library. And boom, look at that. That is me. That's Royce Kitts. I'm a librarian. I've been a librarian, and I'll just give you a little bio real quick. I've been a librarian since 2001. My first mentor in libraries was Kay Russell, and she was the former assistant director at the North Central Kansas Libraries. And she was very instrumental in guiding me towards getting my MLS and just made me feel really wanted as a librarian. And I always like to give a little shout out to her to start off because she's someone who's very special to me. So, and then, hey, there's a picture of me happy. That's not so often. Now, I need to slow down because I feel like I'm talking a little fast. So I want you to kind of be able to jump in here if you need. Anna from Northeast Kansas Library Systems. I've worked in them all at this point, so it's always get a little bit confused, so my apologies. But if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the chat box, and Anna will kind of chime in and let us know if there's a question. So why is community engagement important? One of the things that we talk about in libraries is we need to make ourselves relevant again. And I think we do a good job with that. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people don't know we're relevant anymore. The people that use us every day, that come into the library every day, they understand why we're important. But not everyone thinks that. Everyone, especially with the advent of smartphones and easy access information on computers, not everyone understands the relevancy that libraries can have. So part of a community engagement is getting out there and letting people know that, yes, the library is still relevant to your needs. The library is still important to the community. The second thing I've listed is it builds collaborations. One of the reasons that I'm big on collaborating with other people here in the community is that I'm inherently a lazy person, and I don't like doing all the work myself. When there's a project that we can work on that affects the community, the first thing I think about is who are some other players in the community that we can pull in to get some real nice collaboration going. A project that we have here at my library is called the Children's Healthy Fun Fair. We do this once a year, and it brings together about 15 different groups and organizations. The great thing is that the library gets a lot of the credit for it, but all of these organizations bring about 1 or 2 people to the table to help with the planning and the organization and all those little things that you need to do when you're planning a community event. And we get about 600 to 800 people depending on the year. And it's just something that's a lot of fun. You know, the fire department comes in and sets all up. You know, there's groups that bring in food. The library's there, and we're getting a lot of the credit because that's one of the things that I believe strongly in. Is not only do you get out there and collaborate, you let people know that you're doing that, when letting your logo be on stuff, just being a part of that. And then, you know, that leads directly into building a support base. When you start being relevant to other people, when you start helping them out with projects, you will start to realize that they're also looking out for you. Now, for us, it very much started off as a one-way street, but now we're getting people to call us. And one of the things that I'm most proud of in the almost 3 years that I've been here at this library is the local school district is now starting to contact us with things that they're doing. They're starting to use our meeting room spaces a lot more. And you know, the school district here is a large employer, so a lot of people being really enthused about the library is super awesome. And then, you know, last but not least, for most of us, we live in the community that we serve. And, you know, getting the library out there, helping other groups, singing Kumbaya, all those fun things, it makes your community a better place. And, you know, who doesn't want to live in a nicer town where people help each other out and they think about each other and they care about each other. And I know that friends of mine would say, Royce, you're a little wishy-washy about this kind of stuff. And to them, I would say, you know, there ain't nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong about caring about people that live in your community and helping them out. So sue me, all right? And then another thing, you are valuable. All of us have a part that we can play in our community, and you need to let your community know that. A lot of times they're not thinking about the library. And, you know, sometimes, you know, every person who runs a library or works in a library, you know, when they come in after someone else, there's always a different set of goals. And then, you know, maybe their goal wasn't in community engagement, and now you've been thrust into that role. Well, now you got to get out there, and you got to let the people know that, hey, the librarian's back in town. It's time to help out. Let's get this thing going. Now, I hear a little bird, and it's my friend Eric Gustafson. Now, I asked Eric a couple of these questions, and throughout this presentation, we're going to be visited by Eric here, just because I thought it was funny, and this picture of him just cracks me up and makes me smile. And I figured this would be some built-in smiles for me as I'm doing this for you today. And here's what Eric has to say about, I'm not going to imitate his voice, although I might start to in the middle of this. But here's what Eric has to say about community engagement and connections. With the community connections that the library has made, we have access to the mayor, most of city council, and many prominent nonprofit leaders in the community. This support was extremely helpful in passing a sales tax that helps to fund library operations. So now we're talking about collaboration where not only is it, you know, helping us with that kind of that sweat equity that we build with each other, but we're also talking about something that helps our library grow. And it's really hard to grow a library without extra funds coming in. And so what he's talking about here is kind of one of the reasons that you want to get involved in this and get out there. Engagement is, I'm sorry, this is one of those slides that I think that everything has to have in it, right? So engagement is marketing. And don't get scared, librarians. Don't worry about this. You know, I think if you take everything that says marketing on it, scratch it out and write engagement, you're going to find something that works for you. And that's what community engagement is you're going out there telling people the good news, so to speak, about your library and what is going on. And it's a way to it's a way to tailor the message of what people are hearing about the library. And librarians are teachers, are we not? Do we not help people when they come to the library? Do we not explain to people how things work, basically? And then this is something that I've realized that I had to do. We get a lot of community use through the library, but usually the groups that I go in and speak to haven't used the library in a while. And you really need to take those opportunities to make sure that you're telling them about the library again, telling them about new things. And as you can see down there, I wrote, you got DVDs? That seems to be the thing that when I mention that to people, they're like, well, how much does it cost? And you say, it's free. And they don't understand the resources that we have. DVDs are easy to pick on, but it's a lot of these types of things when people say, will you help me log into a website to figure out how to download an ebook? Well, yes, we will. We will do that. And it's a lot of things that we do like that people don't understand that we do. And then this is what I think is funny. You will be surprised by what they know, what they don't know, and what they think they know. A lot of people have their experience, and what they remember about the library is what happened when they were little kids, for the most part. For the most part, they remember the librarian showing them a children's book or something like that. They don't understand that libraries are also for adults. And there's things and issues and things that adults need help with that the library can help you with. Now, we're talking about community engagement, and hopefully I've built somewhat of a case for why I think you should strongly consider taking on some kind of goal like this. I'm sorry, my bookkeeper just walked in, so I was taking my attention away real quick. But what I want to say is you need to make a plan. And part of making that plan is setting achievable goals. I mean, you can't say, I want to meet every single city commissioner in town, every county commissioner, every legislative person who represents my community. But what you can say is, I want to meet one of them. And a good way to do that, actually, is to just ask around, who do you think is the friendliest city commissioner? Shoot them an email, take a coffee mug to their office and talk to them for a little bit. But I encourage you to start small. Now, there's 4 avenues that I've outlined for where I think you should start. The first one, obviously, the one that matters to a lot of us, you know, in terms of funding and the money that our library has in its back pocket to do things, is local government. The next is the Chamber of Commerce, and that's where all the people in the business community, usually in your town, are centered. And the Chamber of Commerce is just like every other group in town. They're always looking for people who want to get involved. And they're always looking for people who, especially when they're doing events, can just come in and set up chairs and tables. It ain't that hard. You know, I'm not saying you got to join the Chamber of Commerce and be a board member. But if you can show up and help them set up for something, that's a great way to talk to people, you know, especially in an informal environment where you're just doing some work together. Is a great way to talk to people. And it's not always got to be about the library. Sometimes you just want to make sure you create that initial connection. You know, it's much easier to talk to people when you have some kind of thing that you can say in the beginning of it. For instance, you know, I'll pick on my friend Robin because she's right here. So, you know, one of the things I know about Robin is she's been recently married. So one of the things when I run into her, give her a big hug. You know, I don't hug my city commissioners yet, but you know, I was like, hey, how's your husband doing? How are things going? You know, and that kind of small talk. It's not small talk, you know, it's big talk. It's something that really gets us engaged with each other, you know, and, you know, when I see the people at the store that I know are, you know, involved with the government here in town, I just give them a wave and say, hi, how you doing? The next is social support services. And this is really important in my town. If you're unfamiliar with Liberal, we have 78.2% of our children in this town qualify for free and reduced price lunch. We have a 20.8% poverty rate. We have the highest rate of teen pregnancy in the state of Kansas. We have the highest rate of citizens without high school diplomas. There is a huge demand for social support services in our town. And luckily, I'm able to be a member of a group called the Liberal Area Coalition for Families. And we have a meeting once a month where we talk about the different issues that are happening in our town and the ways that we can all help each other out. The beauty of that is they had grown so big and did not have a meeting space anymore. That group now meets in my library. So when we talk about the things that the library can do for the people at that meeting, I stick around for about 30 minutes to an hour talking to people and then showing them the different resources that the library has. So there's a way of community engagement where I don't even have to leave where I am. I just have to walk out of my office, go downstairs, and talk to people for a little bit. And then the fourth on my list, and this is something that I'm a huge fan of, it's a Rotary motto, and it's called service above self. And just the way that I was raised is you take care of those around you. And then, you know, that's what service organizations do in our town. And we'll talk more about that later. Let me get caught up on my notes real quick. And we're back to Eric. So what would Eric say? Now, if you don't know Eric Gustafson, he is the director at the Derby Public Library. And there is no better example of synergy between the library and the city manager than there is between Eric and the city manager in his town. In fact, she has spoken at KLA a couple of times about how librarians can approach the people that work in local governments. So let's hear what Eric would say. First of all, I was invited and have been attending city directors meetings on a weekly basis. Even though I am not supervised by the city manager, being at the table with the other directors is a huge advantage. They see me as working with them for a common goal rather than competing with them for resources. And then, the underlayment of this statement that I think is really important is you need people in city government to put a face to the library. Let them know that it's a person working over there, and it's just not a line item on a budget that they see once or twice a year or once a month when they're sending the financial statements over. You want them to know who it is. That's one of the things I love so much about, my town's only about 20,000, but when I go out and about, rarely does anyone call me Royce. They call me the librarian. And I love it. It makes me feel like a superhero, which is always awesome. I try to keep my shirt on when I go out. But one of the things that I think is really cool is that I am always matched up with what I do here at the library. I am always a physical. Now, what it also means, if I get angry and I'm in traffic, I got to keep my hands inside the vehicle. So that's one of those things that you think about a little bit. You never know who's in that other car, right? The next step. Now, this is something I'm only going to recommend one book today. And I wrote it down. I don't have my glasses real quick, so just a second. It's called Getting Things Done by David Allen. If you're someone who needs to get organized, Getting Things Done by David Allen is a perfect way to get started. He's a person who's big on writing lists. But it's not just writing lists and checking things off. Because if you're like me, I have a yellow legal pad on my desk. Actually, I'm looking at my desk right now. I have 3 little notebooks that I think have all the important notes that I need in them. And we can keep lists all day. But the thing that he talks about is that you need to take that list and make the next step. And then that's where I think we lose a lot of people, because a lot of us will say, yeah, I want to get engaged in the community. I want to go out and meet people. Well, the first thing that you need to do is think about what it is. What's that initial step that you're going to take? And then here's what I encourage you to do. Write it down on a piece of paper. Make it physical. Make it real. And then think about what are some of the next steps that you can do to go ahead and make that thing happen. Importantly, set a time limit. If it's always something that's going down to the bottom of your list because you have to figure out the bills, you got an HR issue, you got to make sure the tax forms are in, and you got the money in the bank, then you're not going to do it. But if you say, by this Friday, I'm going to call a city commissioner and see if they want to have a cup of coffee. I'm going to call a city commissioner and see if I can't just drop off a library mug that I had printed. And then real quick, just a little as an aside, do not underestimate the value of library swag. It's something that I would say my library, we spend about $1,000 a year on coffee mugs. Anytime I go somewhere, there's a coffee mug or 2 in my hand. Anytime someone who's attached to any organization in town comes to my office, I make sure they leave with a coffee mug. I'm always making sure that someone has something on them that talks about the library. And my thinking is when they're sitting in the office and they're thinking about, what can happen, that they look over and they see your coffee mug sitting there. Maybe it's the finance director who's going to suggest to the city that, maybe we lower the library's budget by this much this year. And he looks over and sees that mug and puts your face to that mug, right? Puts your mug to that mug, so to speak. So it's a great way to just kind of give someone tangible, something that represents the library. Now, here are just a few of my tips about engagement. Make it meaningful. Now, what I'm going at when I say this is you want to make sure it's not just, hey, I'm going to go join Rotary and I'm going to go to the meetings each Tuesday. What I'm saying is, yeah, well, for one, I'm a Rotarian, so I do encourage you to join Rotary, but don't always sit in the same spot each time. You know, Pete Warner, who's been going to 58 straight years of meetings, he's already heard your spiel about the library. Get up and move around. Go to another table. Tell those other people about the library. Make it your duty as part of that group to make sure that you're able to engage all the people that are part of it. And then get your message out. And you say, what is your message? That's the first thing I think you should ask yourself. What is it that you think people need to know about your library that's going to help them out? For me, here at this library, it's just that we're willing to give you the space that you need to have meetings. We have wireless internet that's going to really help you out in terms of, you know, those presentations that you're going to give. We have a copying machine. We have, and then everybody's best friend, the big, huge laminator that everyone wants in their office. So there's all these kinds of things that I make sure that when I talk about the library, I talk about not only how we're helping the youth, we're doing the story times, we're also kind of a resource center, like an educational resource center for a lot of the groups here in town. Because a lot of them, yes, they have the people and they have a little bit of a budget, but they don't have the space and they don't have the resources to afford the different types of equipment that are usually found in libraries. You know, and you can, there's no policy set on how much you have to charge for copies. If a social organization wants to use your library to print off something, give them a deal. Why not, right? Make it valuable for them to interact with you here at the library. Now, this is something that we were talking about the message and what you have to say about the library. A lot of people assume that libraries are still stuck in, not stuck, but that we still do the same thing that we've always done. You know, we stamp the date, the due date in the back of a book, tell people to be quiet, those kinds of things. And we need to, you know, appeal to, you know, that kind of nostalgia that they have and remind them that, you know, because you want to see someone sweat telling them you're getting rid of books. You know, just tell them, you know, hey, the library still fills that role of making sure that we're helping with early childhood literacy. But there's other things that we're working on as well. For my community, it's adult literacy. You know, for my community, it's helping people who are second language learners who, you know, whose native language is not English, you know. So we have a lot of things that we're doing here at my library to make sure that we're helping not just the younger people, but the older people as well. And then one of the things, you know, that I hear a lot is, well, I got a Kindle, you know, I got my iPad, I don't need the library anymore. Once you start telling them how cheaper it is to get an audiobook or an ebook through one of the state library databases, that starts to matter to people when they realize that that's actually something that you do, you know. And then I think what people, you know, at least from my experience, is they don't think that libraries have kept up with the way that modern life has shifted so quickly. Because, you know, when they come in, they still see the books. They still see the two people standing up there checking books out. They don't think anything's changed. You know, it's usually because there's not a big, huge neon sign going, someone just checked out an ebook online. Someone's listening to an audiobook through a database. Those things, you don't see those things when they're happening in a library, but they're still happening. Uh-oh. Yeah, it's time to make you sweat. Sorry about that. Ooh, some of you are smelly. I haven't had lunch yet, so my blood sugar might be dropping a little bit. So I'm going to get a little goofier than I thought. And then I just noticed I have some furniture polish on my desk, so let's see what happens. Time and sweat. One of the things that I really encourage you to do, and I call these the 3 B's because each one of these starts off with B, right? Be present. If you're going to start getting engaged in the community, if you're going to join an organization, for instance, that helps the community, you can't just show up every other meeting. You got to be there each time, because here's what happens, and especially in a smaller town, they're going to know when you're not there. They're going to want to have a good excuse. That's one of the, like I said, I'm a Rotarian. If I miss a Rotary meeting, I never know when I'm walking through Walmart and someone says, why weren't you at Rotary this weekend? So that's just a little caveat, is make sure that when you're getting out there and about, that you hold yourself to a certain standard of making sure that you're going to be there for these people. And that's what's important too. it's not just about you broadcasting your message about the library, but it's also making sure that when other groups reach out and they need help, that you step up and help them out. You know, that's how collaboration works. It's not a one-way street. You need to make sure that you're also there to help people out. And like I said, be valuable. One of the things that I do, well, I over-volunteer, you know, and it bites me in the butt quite a bit. But I like to be valuable to people. You know, I like to let them know what it is the library can do to help them out. And you know, I'm sure my staff get tired of hearing about the new things, the new ideas that I've come up with. But, you know, that's why they make donuts, people. If you feed your staff donuts, you can have as many good ideas as you want, all right? And I mean that. My board is always like, well, I'd like to work here. There's daylight donuts on here at least once a week. And that's intentional. You know, it's, you know, engagement, it's not easy, you know. Yes, it's going to make your library better. Yes, it's going to get the word out, but it takes a little bit of sweat. It takes some work. You know, it's not easy. If it was easy, you wouldn't be listening to me right now. We wouldn't be talking about this, right? And then time. And then this is something that, you know, as I get older and I start realizing what my limitations are, this is something that we really need to think about. You know, there's community engagement can come at a price. And that price is your free time. Now, if you're like me and you're smart, well, sorry if you're not, but if you're like me and you're smart, you try to do a lot of these things during the workday. You know what I'm saying? You're not scheduling them for at night. But you know what? Lots of groups do things at night. But what I would say is make sure to reserve time for yourself. One of the things that I try to do is make sure that I have Mondays, Fridays, and Sundays off. I cherish those days. Mondays because it's Monday night, right? Who wants to do anything after you've gone back to work on a Monday? But Sundays because I need one day to recharge, to get back out there and do the things that I know are going to be beneficial to my library. And, you know, do what I did when I worked at Washburn. Because hopefully no one here works at Washburn. One of the things that I used to do is I would go into the online scheduler and I would put down Royce is working the reference desk at the education library. Well, we didn't have a reference desk, but I would make sure that my time was blocked off and that time was always my own. So I could relax in my job and do the things that I needed to do. Here's another thing. You do not have to do it all. One of the things that I realized early on is lots of different groups are going to make demands on my time. So one of the things that we started off doing is encouraging staff members to join some of these different service organizations. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it doesn't. You know, a lot of organizations are very much like library organizations. There always seems to be a little bit of a struggle going on. So sometimes it's real beneficial, and then sometimes you have to realize that, you know, this isn't really the best use of this person's time. But, you know, if you're going to encourage your staff members to be a part of service organizations, then you need to enable them to do that. You need to give them time away from the desk to attend meetings. And that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, that my work doesn't always mean sitting at my computer in my chair next to my phone. Sometimes my work involves being outside, lifting a table, putting chairs around it, and then serving food. Sometimes that's my work. And that's just as valuable as being there in your chair and doing the daily tasks that you have to do. Now, it's not just, hey, let's make your life awesome. Let's get you into lions. Let's get you into Kiwanis. And then you just go off and do whatever you want to do. One of the things that I'm a big fan of is that, you know, for instance, my children's librarian is lunchtime Kiwanis. And when she gets back from her meetings, I like to, you know, have just a little informal conversation like, hey, how'd it go today? You know, what's going on? What's going on new in town? You know, is there any way the library can help out? And that's something that I want you to think about when you're doing this, when you are going out and about, is thinking about opportunities.
Hey, Royce.
Oh, go ahead.
Mickey typed a question in. He asks, can you talk a little bit about how how much we can ask our library boards to do. Can we ask them to volunteer for community events representing the library?
Specifically our library boards?
Yes.
That is a very good question. And I'm not just saying that because that kills time so I don't have to answer it and so that I can think of an answer. But, that is something that, in my library, all of my board members, they're also extremely busy because not only are they on my board, it's you get boarditis, don't you? If you're on a library board, there's a chance that you're on for our town, you got the pancake board because we're the international pancake place. But they're extremely busy. I do try to get my board members to engage in local events, but you know what? Here's the thing. I have board members who are also in Kiwanis and Rotary and Lions. So they're involved in those organizations as well. Now, that is something I hadn't thought about. And that's something I'll think about in the future is I've never thought about getting my board members to do those things. But here's the thing. It's like being in a small church. Everyone's doing everything. So when I go out to these events, my board members are already there. They're already a part of the event because that's just the way that a lot of small towns work is everyone's committed and everyone's doing something. But I'll think about that one a little bit more. And I think that's a really good idea. One of the things now I hope I answered his question. If not, I'm sure I'll get a text message later on saying how lame my answer was. But, I want you to be on the lookout for new avenues. And that's one of the things that I do is I make sure to go around and talk to the people that I work with. And I say things like, what are one or two things that you need that would really help you out in your job? What's a project that we could work on that when I'm out and about talking about the library and someone has a question about, well, is there anything you need money for? Which is an awesome thing to hear, right? But if someone says, hey, we got $1,000, do you need anything at the library? And you're like, I don't know. You want to have something ready. This happened to me just recently at a local blood drive we had here in town. I was just sitting there, I feel like I set up a lot of tables and chairs in this town. But for me, that's an easy volunteer work. And I was doing that. And one of the guys who owns one of the local car dealerships says, hey, at Kiwanis, we got about $1,000 and we're looking for somebody to give that money to. Do you have any projects at the library? And, for a little bit, I had been thinking about a project that I call Every Child a Book. And I was like, well, we got this new thing called Every Child a Book. And what it is we want to be able, for every child who attends our story times, to be able to get a free book throughout the entire year of 2017. Every single time they come in. And then when I come back to the library and I go, hey, Elizabeth, guess what? We got a new program called Every Child a Book, because, and you have to think about that, think on the fly a little bit, and so we are looking like we're going to be able to get $1,000 and we're going to be able to leverage that by also approaching another organization who always wants you to already have kind of a partner when you come in to say, hey, we have the Kiwanis with us and we want to buy a lot of these books. Would you want to help us purchase these books for the children? And then that's something that I'm big on too. If it's something for kids, you need to make sure that the people understand it's for the children. Because there's nothing that pulls at the heartstrings more when you're talking about the library than talking about the things that you do for the children in your community. So I encourage you to reach out to new community members as well. Anytime someone joins the Chamber of Commerce, usually they send out an email that says, hey, we're doing a ribbon cutting, at the new Technology for All place here in town. And what they do is they do technology setup for your business. And they also do things like drones and all kinds of toys and everything. And you want to make sure that when they say, hey, do you want to come out and meet the new owners of this new business and do the ribbon cutting and get your picture in the paper? I make sure to go to those. For one, there's free refreshments. And no librarian I know has ever been able to say no to free refreshments, right? But you also get a chance to let that person know that you care, that they're in the community. You get to talk to them about what their business is. And you get to do things like, hey, do you have a library card? And when they say no, say, come on down, we'll get you a library card. It's a great way to just reach out and build that initial, they're going to remember that the first person who spoke to them when they came into town and opened their new business, was someone who worked at the library. Comes in handy when you're looking for gift certificates for summer reading programs as well. And then, anytime a new service comes into town, that's, the economic situation in Southwest Kansas is such that we see a lot of new ideas that spring forth all the time, and always look at those opportunities to get the library in at the ground level. And then we're going to talk about my favorite thing real quick. And I like to talk about this a lot. And I call it instant engagement, just add you, because you have to have a catchy slide. And actually what we're going to talk about is some service clubs and organizations. And I talk about this because usually they are always looking for new people. And they're always, usually the meetings that you have are over a lunch or over a breakfast. So it's always starts off very conversational. It gives you a chance to have a conversation with people over a meal. And there's nothing that people like more than sitting down with somebody, having a cup of coffee and talking about what it is that they do. And just real quick, I think all of us know what a service organization is, but let's just give you a little definition. A service club or service organization is a voluntary nonprofit organization where members meet regularly to perform charitable works, either by direct hands-on efforts or by raising money for other organizations. And I call these the big three, because there's a chance that when I drive into your town, I'm seeing one of these three signs somewhere. And then usually right below it's going to tell me the meeting time and the date that you can meet, right? They're kind of disappearing. You're not seeing these as much. But, I'm a Manhattan, Kansas guy. So when I roll into Manhattan, Kansas, I see these signs here. And even in the smallest towns, you're likely to have one of these clubs. What's the town? Arlington. I just drove through Arlington not too long ago. It's kind of in south central Kansas. And, there's a Lions Club sign out there. And then here's the thing. These kinds of service organizations, they're always wanting members. They're always, that's, some background on like Rotary, for instance. That's our goal. That's like one of the main goals when we talk about what's our goal for the year. More members, more members, more members. There was a time and a place in America where everyone felt like they had to be a part of a service organization. Those people are, as I would say, aging out of the system, and they want young, fresh people to come in and keep their legacies going. It's not so much that they need more Rotarians because they need more money. It's because they've spent 50 years in Rotary and they care about Rotary, and they want someone to come in who can help them out and keep it going for another 20, 30 years. Now, they want leaders on here, and it looks like it might be a positive thing. Be real careful. When you join one of these groups, they're going to look at you like fresh meat, and they're going to want to put you in a position of leadership as soon as possible. Think about that. Are you going to be able to be the leader that they want and be a librarian at the same time? Because it's a commitment. I said yes to Rotary International I'm going to be the president in July. And I wish I would have thought a little bit more about it. I'm going to be extremely busy when I do that. I have to plan a meeting once a week. I have to plan the food once a week. I have to make sure that all these pieces are in place once a week, on top of all the different visionary things that we're supposed to do, all the different district meetings, and then somehow have my board be okay with the fact that, yeah, I'm going to be out of the office a little bit more than I intended to. And that's something to think about when you join a group like this. Ask your board about that. One, to see if they might want to help you pay for it, which my board said, you can pick one of these three and we'll help you pay for it. But you also want to make sure that they understand that your participation in one of these groups is going to be a time commitment. Here in about a week, I'm going to a conference for about 4 days to represent Rotary. And that's something that, I've talked to my board about, and how the leadership things that I'll learn there will be something that I can bring into my own library as well. But I encourage you to check one of these out. And the good thing, like I said, is there's either lunch or breakfast that usually goes with this. So when you think about the expense, also think about, how much would it be? For me, that's what I did when I signed up for Rotary. It's like, it cost me about $10 for a meal. For me, it's buying lunch for myself once a week, and then I basically paid my dues for the year. And it's not the best food, but still, it's a good way to, like I said, this is the third and final time that we get to hear from my friend Eric, who is also a Rotarian. For example, my involvement in community groups and the connections that it has allowed me to build with other community, pardon me real quick. Start over. For example, my involvement in community groups and the connection that has allowed me to build with other community leaders. Rotary is a great example of this. I have a chance to interact on a weekly basis with the major players in my community. Since we already have a relationship, it's easy to start conversations about shared projects and partnership opportunities. See, and there's that fresh face, that Eric. Okay, now here's me in Rotary. Here's my picture. When you look at the table right here, this is the work that I've been doing with my Rotary group. I am the president-elect this year, and you do a grant-funded project. So I'm doing a project for the community to raise awareness about military suicide prevention resources. So I've partnered with all kinds of different groups in town to make sure that we get banners displaying the resource number that people can call if they're contemplating suicide so that they can get help. When you look at this picture and why I love this picture so much, and we're going to work left to right, starting with this guy in the tie. He is the Dean of Academics at Seward County Community College. Next to him is the owner of the largest largest insurance company here in town, the one that everybody uses. Right next to him is Ivanhoe Love. He's the head of Adolescent Support Services here in town. There's Rhonda. She's head of the bank here, the big bank that we have here in town. Right next to her is Mike Brock. He's the manager of the largest hotel here in town. Then we got the big real estate guy there, John Engel. Next to him is Dr. Leslie Bissell, who's with the Southwest Guidance Center, the mental health facility here in town. Right next is Jim Bloomer. He just golfs, but he's a nice guy. And then right there, the guy who looks somewhat confused to be in the picture, that is Representative Francis, and he's our local legislator. So one of the cool things about that is I get to talk to him all the time. And then when I send him an email about a concern I have that's going up, I mean, we all have concerns about Topeka, right? So I can just shoot him a quick email. Hey, Shannon, how do you feel about this? What are you thinking about this, And then give him what I think is the library side of the story. And then there's Royce. After working about 3 straight days at the fair from 8 in the morning to 9 at night. So that's the face you get when Royce is worn out. But, that's the thing is, we serve at this event right here that we set up for, we had about 200 people come to that event. Of course, I'm wearing my Rotary shirt, but people also see the librarian there and know that the librarian cares. Now, the only thing about this was they called me up on stage to speak, and it's hard for me to talk about suicide prevention without tearing up because I've lost a lot of friends to that. So it allows me, Rotary allows me not only to speak passionately about, the library, but other things that I care about as well. And then this is just a fun picture because this is something I think we need to remember too about when we join a social service organization. On the left there is Robin Newell. She's the director at the Emporia Public Library. And this is just her with her Lions Club. And the job that she had before this one. And that's something else too. You get to have a lot of fun in these service organizations. So think about that as well. It's not all work all the time. I have no idea what's going on here. They're just holding a turkey.
So Royce,
yes, go ahead.
We have a few things that have come in chat.
Okay.
Diana Weaver mentioned that she was actually a Lions Club of Arlington member at one time.
Oh, there we go.
So, and then Mike McDonald asked the question, for folks who are introverted and perhaps anxious or hesitant to join a club or attend a meeting, any thoughts or tips for them in taking those first few steps?
Well, now here's the thing. When I have my library hat on, I realize I have to be extroverted. I am not that way naturally. When I go to something like ALA, the annual conference that we have here, the first thing I do is look for a friend. I need someone there with me. And that's what I would encourage you to do, is no one says that 2 librarians can't roll up on them, right? So, if you got another staff member who maybe is a little bit more gregarious than you are, a little bit more outgoing, and maybe not so fearful of that type of environment, drag them along with you. It also is helpful, if you know someone who's already in that organization, say, hey, can we meet up and head over to the meeting together? There's nothing, those are just some, simple ways to kind of be able to do that. It's, for me, I always show up early so that when I walk into a room, I'm not walking into a room full of people. I show up about 15, 20 minutes early so that I'm usually there by myself, and then other people are coming in. And it kind of lessens, I get a little anxious, panicky when I have to be around a lot of people. So if I can always start off small by getting to know a couple of people as they filter into the room, I always go for that. And that's what I would encourage for Michael and other people who are kind of a little hesitant about it, is see if you can't partner up with someone, see if you can't show up a little bit early, or see if you can't connect with someone in the group and have them invite you and then go into the meeting. It's, or you could drink, I don't know. There's all kinds of things. But, the thing is, there's lots of things that we put off because we're anxious or we're afraid. And then when we do it, we're like, well, this wasn't that hard. And for a lot of people that are in that organization, they've probably been through that very similar experience. And then for me, the older I get, I just say, you know what, I'm really nervous right now. And I think there's a lot of power into, especially when we're feeling nervous, is saying it out loud. I'm nervous. I'm nervous right now. So think about those things. And you're always free to reach out to me and I can give you some more advice. Or I could just drive to your town and walk in with you too as well. But one of the things that I want to remind people is that when you're engaged in the community, be authentic about it. I think we all know there's the car commercials in Wichita are a perfect example of this. You don't ever want to go to Wichita and buy a car based on those commercials that you see, because you don't ever feel like they're being authentic. When you get involved, do it because you want to do it. It's not just about the library, but it's the fact that you want to be a part of it. So this is where we get a little bit wishy-washy and we say things like, you want to show love. You want to show that you love your community, and you're doing this out of a love for your community and out of a desire to better the library. You want to here's the thing too, and this is something I need to work on. I make a lot of jokes throughout the day. Probably 10% of them are funny. That's very high. But I need to make sure that when I'm joking around, that I don't cross the line where I'm being disrespectful. That's what people are going to remember. And this sounds kind of like a little bit of dad speak, and I feel like my son's here with me. But you need to make sure that when you're out and about, that you're being respectful. And that you're composing yourself in a way that doesn't negatively reflect on the library. A perfect example would be, I got one of those phone calls, and then someone from the Air Museum, and they said, were you going to help out with the Drone Academy this weekend? And I was like, I guess. And then I ended up on a Saturday, and I spent 6 whole hours climbing up and down ladders, getting drones unstuck from the ceiling. Now, at the end of 6 hours, Royce is wiped out. Royce really wants to tell the person who called him what he thinks of him, and say, but I made sure that I kept it to myself. That kind of feedback wasn't needed, and all it was going to do is make me look bad. And then here's the last thing on the show part here. Is show some recognition. When you do work with other people, one of the things that I try to keep on my desk is a big, huge stack of thank you cards. I know it's kind of a lost art, as they say, but one of the things that I like to do when I come back from helping someone out or someone's come and helped me out is I'll write a quick thank you card and drop it in the mail. What are stamps up to nowadays? 45, 49 cents. It's not that much to say that you're thankful, by just putting a little bit of effort into it. Now, go ahead.
We have one more question that came in.
Okay, and then I'll do my final commercial on the way out.
So this is from Carolyn Knotts, who's director at McLeod Public Library. She asked, how do I approach the community and help with fundraising? We don't have a Friends of the Library, so fundraising is on me.
Fundraising, that is a good one. Here is something that I would suggest is reaching out to Friends of Kansas Libraries. If you don't have a friends group, it's not that hard to get one started. And the financial, there's 2 pieces of getting a friends group going. And this is a whole other presentation I have actually. So maybe this will be later on. But there's two things that go with creating a friends group. One is you got to have $25, I believe, to send in to the Friends of Kansas Libraries to get an official Friends of Kansas Libraries group going. But you have to have the people. You need at least 3, 4, or 5 people to, and for a lot of smaller towns, that is how many people are involved with the Friends group. In terms of fundraising, some of the things that I like to do is we're doing a lot of remodeling here at my library. So after this year is over, we will have remodeled the entire library in the last 2.5 years. So it's a big facility, lots of space. And what I do is I look at the things that we're doing in terms of remodeling, and I actually will send letters out to specific organizations asking them if they will help us. There are almost always in every community and in every region in every state some nonprofit granting institutions that are looking forward to giving away their money to people. Now, if you're in Southwest Kansas, we have a lot of these groups, and then at the end of the year, they're calling me and they're saying, Royce, we got money left over and we need to give someone a check. Always let people know that the library is always looking, for extra funds to do things that better the library. In terms of fundraising, it's hard for me to help with that kind of advice, because it really is as easy for me as saying, hey, we need $5,000 for tables and chairs for our newly remodeled community room. Can you help with that? And then a week later, getting a phone call and say, hey, we got the money for you. So we've done a really good job on letting people know, that we have projects that we're working on. Whenever we're working on a project, I write an article in the paper. I make sure that, we let the people in our community know what the needs are that we have. And if people don't know what you need in your library to make it better, then they might not be so generous and then just giving you money. I think most people want to know that when they give you money, you're going to use it for something very specific, or they know what they're getting out of it. So I encourage people to do that when they're fundraising. Set a list of goals that you're going to use that money for, so that when people do decide to give you money, they know what it's going towards. When you get the money and when you use it for the things in your library. When we just finished the remodeling of our downstairs area, we made sure to have an open house party and invited all the people that helped raise funds for that, to show that appreciation. Invite the paper, get your picture taken, show some appreciation and some recognition for the people that have helped you out. Fundraising is not something that I'm all too good at. In fact, I can't even say the phrase that well. But, there is one thing that we have in our libraries that is always turning over, and that is books. Book sales are a great way to get some instant cash for your library if you need it, because it involves one of the things that we're kind of always doing anyway. If you're buying, let's say, 500 books a year, and unless you got a whole bunch of new shelves, you're getting rid of 500 books a year. And even if you just sell those at 50 cents a piece, you're talking about $250. So there's, books are kind of the commodity that we have in our libraries that are very easily disposed of, I'm sorry to say, but that you can use a book sale for. And then that's where the Friends comes in handy too, because it gives people an opportunity. I think anytime that you have a group like the Friends, you want to make sure that there's something that they can do that really helps the library out. And I think book sales are a great way to do that. I hope I answered the question a little bit. Like I said, it's I'd probably know a better answer for that one if it was a little bit harder for me to raise funds. And I think it's one of those things where you gotta get over it, and you just gotta reach out and do it. Do we have any more questions, Anna?
No, just a comment from Mike McDonald. He says, never underestimate the power of a handwritten thank you note. Exactly.
Here is my commercial. So if you're done and you got things to do, you can skip the commercial. But I encourage you to join the public library section of the Kansas Library Association. We are a team. We are our best members. We are our own expert group. What works in one town will probably work in another. You know, that's the thing is I think we get siloed and we don't understand that, you know, the things that you're dealing with in your library, even in Johnson County, they're dealing with those issues. In Wichita, they're dealing with those issues. In Norton, Kansas, they're dealing with those. It's all different scales. But in a lot of ways, we're all dealing with the exact same things. Reach out when you need help. And this is one of the things, I know that when you go on the listserv, you're like, if I see one more ink cartridge that someone has posted, I'm going to just keel over. If I see one more set of tattered shelves that someone wants to get rid of. But the value of it, don't be afraid to get on there and ask a sincere question if you have one. There's always someone willing to tell you their opinion, as I've found out in life. For instance, one of the ways that you can participate is go on to www.kslibassoc.org and go ahead and get your membership started in the Kansas Library Association. Like I said, one of the reasons that we're doing this is we want to show value to your membership. We want to do things that help you with that continuing education. I want to say thank you to the Northeast Kansas Library System for being able to host this webinar. And I want to say thank you to Anna as well personally for being able to archive this. It was a question that I had. And if you're like me, you think that you can do a lot of work while you're sitting there listening to a webinar, and then when it's over, you're like, I have no idea what I just listened to. So being able to have that kind of archive ready is just something that I think is very much appreciated. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My name is Royce Gibbs, and my email is director@lmlibrary.org. And I wish all of you a very happy day, and I hope that you're able to get engaged in your community in some small way. So thank you.
Thank you, Royce. That was a great presentation. And he mentioned the archive that will be available probably tomorrow. Robin is going to, at our office, will actually post that so it's available, and she or I will send out a message when it's ready.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks. Bye.